Yes, Matt, good to have you back on the show. You write this incredible piece. The GOP is losing young Christians, and it's pretty amazing. Here's part of it. A couple decades ago, the Christian Coalition provided ground troops for the conservative movement. But today, perhaps having seen what happened to their parents' generation, many young Christians are choosing to be conscientious objectors in the culture wars. Some of this may be due to changing attitudes concerning some hot-button social issues. But there's also a growing sense among young Christians that political involvement, no matter how pure the original motives, is a corrupting force. For Christians, political involvement has a way of breaking bad. The real danger is that over time, it has a coarsening effect, and that our political ranks and church pews alike will be filled full of Walter Whites who will do anything to achieve their goals. They are wise as serpents, but no longer innocent as doves. For what shall it profit a man if he should win the election, but lose his soul?
You know, Matt, I've always commented that it was fascinating. In 1994, I had a lot of young Christians coming in that wanted to work on my campaign. They were talking about social issues. By the time I left in 2001, they were talking about AIDS in Africa. They were talking about the hungry. I saw a sea change even over those 6, 7, 8 years, and that's only continued. And your piece, I think your piece is remarkable because it paints a real challenge for a Republican Party that has been built on evangelical support since 1980.
Absolutely, Joe. You can't underestimate the importance of Christian conservatives and helping the Republican Party achieve victory from Ronald Reagan up until George W. Bush. But in recent years, that's changed. The party's obviously becoming a little more libertarian. That's part of it. But I think part of it also is, look, there's always been this tension between the city of God and the city of man. There's nothing new about that. But I think that modern politics, where really anybody can get on Twitter, and what works is to be really negative, it's hard to balance that with, you go to church on Sunday and you're sitting in the pew and you're hearing love thy neighbor, bless those who curse you, and then you get involved in politics and it's
Matt,
not the other side.
I know you've seen it, but some of the harshest tweets, you go in and you look and they'll go Christian, conservative, da-da-da, and you look and then you just see this just a spewing of hatred, and well, that's not exactly the type of guys and women that I grew up with at First Baptist Church in Meridian or in Pensacola or anywhere else. And this when it all costs approach, just to be blunt, we always told ourselves, yeah, that's what liberals do.
Right.
And now, unfortunately, the shoe seems to be on the other foot as well.
When the irony, Joe, is that really I think what's happened is conservatives are aping the left. And if you read the conservative blogs as I do and follow the conservative movement, the really interesting thing is that a guy named Saul Alinsky, who's a leftist organizer out of Chicago, he's passed away, I think, in the 1970s, but he wrote this book called Rules for Radicals. He dedicated it to Lucifer. The message is essentially that the ends justify the means. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton studied at his feet. And now it's conservatives, not liberals, but conservatives who are holding this book up and emulating it. And, of course, the danger, Joe, is that you have people who sort of get, this is insidious, that you get involved in politics for all the right reasons, for virtuous reasons, and you slowly get sucked in, and the next thing you know, it's...
Yeah, Matt, let me bring one other thing up, and then I want to pass it around the table. But this is very important, too. There also is a conflict with massive cuts for the poor and Matthew 25. There just is. And that's something, as a member of Congress, I don't believe the federal government can do what churches and communities can do. I don't think they can do it as well. But a lot of times we're given the choice of cutting it off. I remember in the contract with America, I'd never said this until now. One of the items that I voted against, I was a conscientious objector to it, was like a $250 billion cut in Medicaid. And we were told to go out and call this welfare for medicine. A lot of poor people out there that would have suffered with those extreme cuts. I don't care being called a rhino here. You read Matthew 25, and there is a responsibility if you believe what Jesus said to figure out how to alleviate suffering in the poor, and just cutting it off without a transition doesn't really square
Right.
up with Matthew 25, does it?
Well, Joe, I think you make a very good point. And as a conservative, I believe that there are certain things that we as individuals are called to do that the federal government isn't called to do. But as an individual, I have to care very much about the poor. I'm called to do that. And so the problem is the rhetoric. If I now put on my political hat and I go before the cameras and I use rhetoric that implies that I don't care about the poor or, let them eat cake, that's a problem. It doesn't mean that I think the federal government necessarily needs to be the one to solve it. But if I'm coarsening my heart and going out there and this laissez-faire attitude, that says something about me as an individual.
Yes.
Yeah.
Matt, it's Nicole Wallace. I want to ask you about young evangelical Christians. I saw them sort of as one of the great hopes for the Republican Party. They were more progressive on social issues, on immigration,
environment,
on climate change, on same-sex marriage. Where will they go? I mean, the coarsening that you describe is undeniable. But these are also people who care not just about the country they live in, but the world they live in. They're globally minded. So where are they going to go? Are they up for grabs? Are they disenfranchised? Where are they going?
I think if Democrats field candidates like Barack Obama, some will go there. Even though I don't like President Obama's philosophy, I think that he did have this aspirational rhetoric that did appeal to young evangelicals. I think some of them have been let down by him.
Right.
I think that they're not going to flee the Republican Party en masse. I think what's happened is they're just no longer going to be as the ground troops for the Republican Party. I mean, as Joe said, they're going to focus on AIDS in Africa instead of going door to door for some candidate in the Midwest. That's probably what happens.
And by the way, that is Mika. That's a devastating loss, because I can tell you my 94 campaign was run by young evangelicals that would go door to door, that would make phone calls. I mean, I didn't, and I didn't even go to the churches to find them. They came to me, and they ran a grassroots campaign despite the fact I was underfunded. If they stop doing that, as Matt said they're doing, that is a serious problem for the party.
Matt Lewis, thank you so much. Great piece. Coming up.
Thank you, Matt.